Hi, thanks for tuning in. Today we're on a live job. This is a seam polishing job. We're going to show you the whole Quartz Renew system as it was intended, from using pads to grind down the seam, to medium pads for medium damage, to the final polishing stage. As we introduced about a year ago, the Quartz Renew resin pads, they start from 50 grit to 1500 grit. The resin pads were intended to start at a point where you need to remove material. In this case, we're working on a seam that has some lippage, so we will definitely need to start here to even out the seam and move up from there. In the case where you're working on lighter damage, for example, a scratch that you can see but can't feel, we don't need to start in this range. We would start with the lighter pads. This 4-step system is essentially a diamond sandpaper system. It's about a 1,000 to 3,000 grit range. So you would start in here and move up from there. Okay, and then we have the Quartz Renew Polish system. It's a 3-step system. It's applied with foam and wool pads, and this is to finish out the polishing process, to basically go from the diamond polishing that we did previously to matching the factory finish at the end. So we're going to show you this whole system today. This repair happens to require all 3 steps, and when we're finished, we also have the Quartz Renew cleaner, which is a daily cleaner that the customer can use. It's safe to use on quartz, and you can leave that with the customer when you're finished. So we're going to start our repair with the resin pads. As I mentioned earlier, the resin pads go from 50 grit up to 1500 grit. Depending on the repair that you're working on, it will really be up to your assessment as to where you start with which grit. In this particular case, based on the lippage that I'm seeing, I'm going to start at 200 grit. I may have to move down from there just depending on what I'm seeing when I start, but I'm guessing that 200 grit is going to be my starting point, and I'm going to move through to 1500 grit and stop at that point. Okay, so just a couple quick mentions outside of the product that we're using today, which is also very important, is the polisher that we're using. There are several polishers out there on the market. Because we're working in a house, we do not have the luxury of working with a water feed. Very important thing to note. So in that, because of that, we have to find a polisher that starts at a low RPM. In this case, the Flex polisher works very well. This starts at 600 RPM and goes up to 2100. Many of the polishers that are on the market start at around 1200 RPM. Because we're not working with a water feed, that will not give us good results regardless of the pads we're using, because it'll dry up so quickly. Okay, so that's a very important first step to keep in mind, is the polisher that you're using. The second step, while you can use many flexible backers, I do use a foam transition pad, which gives me the flex and allows my polisher to move around slightly. When you're using a hard backer, it will have the tendency to make the pad dip into the countertop and create scratching for that. So a good transition pad is very important as well. You notice my feed rate, I'm going about a ½ an inch every couple seconds. What that is doing is allowing my pad to do the work. Most have a tendency to move around too fast. We refer to this as feed rate. If your feed rate is too fast, then you're not allowing the pad to get the highest shine for that particular grit. So feed rate is very important. Okay, so I'm going to stop and check my work to see where I am. I still have a little bit of lippage there. Okay, but you can see the dullness that I'm getting from grinding it down, which is absolutely normal. As you can see, our shiny area right here, so it's still telling me that I'm still high on this side because my pad is skipping over that part. Okay, as we move back a little further, you can actually see where this side is a little higher because it's shiny right here, so my pad's skipping over that part. So I want to get to the point where it's dull like this area all the way back. Okay, as you can see, I'm marking off my area. I don't really want to go out past my mark because it's not necessary. That makes my repair too wide, and likelihood of success is diminished. Okay, I can see in the front now that I'm getting much more level. My feel is still there, but it's getting much better. As I move back slightly, there's hardly any feel to my seam right there. So that's what I want to use as my standard for the rest of the seam. Okay, so that's basically the level that I'm looking for in my first grit, is to get everything flat. So all I see is a thin seam line. And then I'm just going to progress through my grits from there. And that's just a matter of getting back to my factory shine at this point. But my first grit, my only goal is to basically level this out. Okay, so I've finished with the 200 grit. As you can see, my seam's level all the way back. There's really no feel to it now. Now I'm just progressing through my grit. So this was 200. Between each grit, I want to mark just past my polishing area. Okay, so I'm going to make a mark just past there. I don't really need to go past that. I want my pad to overlap, you know, about a ½ an inch, 3/4 of an inch beyond my mark, so it's removed, but I don't need to go any wider than that. I want to try to keep my repair area as small as possible. So that was 200 grit. Now we're going to 400 grit. Okay, so this is the look after my 400 level. What I'm looking for now between each grit is an evenness. Obviously it's going to be dull for a while, but I want it to be relatively even. So I'm looking for high and low spots. I'm happy with where this is at this point. It's pretty even. And when we look at countertop level, you can actually see that it's getting glassy already. Okay, so now it's just a matter of progressing through the grits. And you can see at this level as well that from this angle you really can't distinguish where the seam was. Okay, so that's what we want. So every grit's going to be the same between. I want to capture everywhere that my pad's gone, even where the pad is kind of skipped out a little bit. I want to capture that, because if I don't capture with the next grit, it won't go away and it'll stay there till the end, and then we'll be guessing as to what we need to do to fix it. So again, I want to mark off my whole area. Okay, and now I'm ready to go to the next grit, which is 800. Okay, so I'm just kind of stopping halfway through my 800 grit, just so you can see the difference in the grits and how it's progressing. So now I'm getting pretty glassy, which is what I want. I want it to be even and glassy. But you can see this was my 400 grit here, and this is my 800. Okay, you can see the difference there. Okay, so I've made a pass with the 800 grit going front to back, side to side to offset my corn rowing. Again, I'm looking for high and low spots. I'm fairly even, but I do notice that there's some low areas along my edge right here, so I'm going to make another pass with that, just so that I don't require too much of my next step. But other than that, I'm ready for 1500. Okay, so after that second pass, you can see the dullness has been evened out. So I'm ready to go to 1500 now. Same step as before. I'm going to mark off my area. Okay, so I'm doing my assessment after my first pass with the 1500. You can see that it's very glassy through here. As I move back to the center of the seam, you can see it actually gets much hazier than my front side. I know this is the potential of my 1500 pad, so I want the whole area to look like this. So I'm going to make another pass through this back half of the seam so I don't require so much of my last steps to match the finish. But you can see now, you know, as we talked about before with the Quartz Renew polish, the first step is the Snakeskin Revealer. That's intended to put the texture back into the product. And you can clearly see now when we diamond polish how we remove that texture, even on a fine grained product like this. So that'll be our first step in the polish phase, is to get that texture back. Okay, so we finished with our resin pad system up to 1500, and we have a pretty glassy finish now. There's still some hazing. We're going to move into the next series of pads, which will do a good job of cleaning this area up to make it more even than it is now, and that will prep us to go into the final polishing stage to match the factory finish. So the 4-step Quartz Renew pad system is roughly a 1000 to 3000 grit range. Because we've used the resin pads up to this point, the 1500, to start at 1 would be slightly going backwards. So it's really not necessary in this case to use all 4 steps. So we're going to pick it up at this point with a 3 and 4 to prep us for the final polish. Okay. If we were starting with this pad system, like I said, with a fine scratch or something like that that didn't require a lot of material removal, then we would start with the first step, go through 4, and then go to the polish stage. So in this case, we're going to start with the 3 pad, go to the 4 pad, which will then prep us for going to the final polishing phase. Okay, again, I want to just give you a visual halfway through this particular grit. So we're on the 3 pad, and we've stopped polishing right there. So you can see how, compared to here where it still has the haziness to my front side, it's really cleaned up a lot of that unevenness, and that's really what I'm looking for, which will prep me up well for using the polish in the end. Okay, so I'm pretty even. I'm satisfied generally with how this is turning out. There is a little bit of unevenness in the backside here that I'm just going to make a quick second pass just to even that out as best as possible and make it a little easier for my polishing phase. Okay, so my second pass definitely cleaned that up better. I'm pretty even through here, so I'm ready for my fourth pad at this point. Okay, so we finished our diamond pad polishing, which is a crucial part to getting a factory finish. All the steps that I spoke about previously, like low RPMs, using plenty of water, marking off your area, crisscrossing at each step, those are all crucial things to getting yourself prepped to use the polish at the end. And if we don't do our due diligence during those phases, we may expect too much out of the Quartz Renew polish at the end. The way our seam exists at this point, I'm very happy with, and this will be the level that you would need to be in order for the Quartz Renew polish to come into play. So we've removed our damage, or in this case, we've leveled out our seam, and we've gotten, I would say, 90–95% back to factory finish. And that gap will be bridged now with the Quartz Renew polish. So this is a three-step system. The first step that we're using is the Snakeskin Revealer. This is applied with a wool bonnet, and this is not really a polishing phase. This will be to take out the glassiness in our seam and introduce the texture and blend with the factory texture that exists now. You have to keep in mind that when we diamond polish, the resin and the quartz are slightly on different levels. And when we polish our damage down, whether it's a scratch or polishing our seam, we're putting those two on the same level, and that's why it is so glassy. This is a two-dimensional product, unlike granite, which is one-dimensional. So we have to introduce the texture back into the product first. The second and third steps are designed to take out any residual hazing that exists and start blending with the factory finish. The resin polish, the second step, will separate, as you can see. It's important to shake that until it becomes white, and then it's ready for use. That's applied with a green foam pad. And then our final polish, which will ultimately give us our final finish, goes on with a white foam pad. Again, we're going to use low RPMs, much like our diamond polishing, slow feed rate, all the same habits that we spoke about earlier. Okay, so I've marked off my area. You can see that I'm slightly glassy here compared to the factory finish out here. So I definitely need to add texture to this polishing area. So like I mentioned, the first step is the Snakeskin Revealer. I'm going to apply a liberal amount. Again, this is not a coating, this is not a compound, so to speak. This is more of a abrasive type process. So I need a liberal amount, especially when I'm using a new pad. The pad will really soak up a lot of the polish. With my first step, it is an aggressive polish, so I want to make sure that I do this in short intervals. I've spent about 15–20 seconds on this area, and as you can see, my texture is coming in quickly. I'm still slightly glassier than my factory finish, but it does work quickly, so I want to be careful not to overdo this step because my snakeskin will become too prominent, and then I'll have to go back to diamond polishing to undo that. So I've squeegeed my polish out of the area, checked my results. Now I'm going to just pull it back in and continue until I can blend the texture. Okay, so there's a look after my second round on my right side. I'm blending pretty well. I'm happy with how that looks in terms of texture. I still have a little bit of work to do on my left side, so I'm going to make another pass, and that'll probably set me up for my resin polish. Like I said, that's after my third pass. Texture is blending in quite well. As you can see, Now I have a good idea of about the amount of time I have to work this seam. I'm going to go ahead and finish on my back half and set up for the resin polish phase. So there's my view after using the Snakeskin Revealer. You can see my texture is pretty even here, and I don't have that real glassy look in the center like I did before. Now I want to just really assess my area. If I see any glassy spots that need to be addressed, I want to go back over those. I can still see a little bit of my transition line here on the side where this is slightly glassier. I'm going to hit that real quick, maybe 15-20 seconds, and then I'll be ready to go into my next step. Okay, so I made my last pass with the Snakeskin Revealer. You can see my transition line that was there has blended out much better. So now I'm ready to go to my resin polish, which will simply blend out even more and take out any residual hazing that's left in that area. Okay, so I'm starting my second round of the Quartz Renew polish, the resin polish. Again, this product will separate. You want to make sure that this is shaken very well before you use it. So it should be totally white before you apply it. This goes on with a green foam pad. And again, this is designed for removing hazing. This first step was strictly for texture. The second and third steps will be for hazing. So we finished our resin polish phase, the second step, applied with the green foam pad. We made about 2 passes, front to back, side to side, very slow feed rate to let the polish do the work. And you can see our seams blending in quite well at this point. So I have one more step in the Quartz Renew polish phase. That'll be the final polish that goes on with a white foam pad, and that will even out. At this point, I'll be really looking to even out any of this fine residual hazing. You can see this little band along the edge here that I need to even out, and just all those subtle things to make the finish as even as possible. During my polishing phase, a good way to keep track of my feed rate to make sure that it's slow is to have very tight rings, like you see right here. My rings are very wide. My rings are very wide, like this. That means my feed rate is too fast. I want rings that are approximately 1/16 to an 1/8 inch apart, and that's a good way to keep track of my feed rate. So just like my diamond polishing, I'm going to go front to back, side to side for each step, check my work, and then go from there. I can do this as many times as I want to. Second and third steps, it'll only polish to a certain level and then won't polish any further. So it won't hurt to spend too much time on these phases. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this was very helpful for you to save tops in the future. Again, Quartz is a polishing process that takes a little bit of time and patience, but the Quartz Renew system was designed to help you with basically any repair that you come into. Again, this is kind of a toolbox approach. Your assessment will really be crucial in terms of where you start in this process. But again, just to recap, you can start at 50 grit resin pad all the way up to 3000 range. After that, the pads will not totally get you back to factory finish. That's why we created the Quartz Renew polish system, the 3-step system, which helps blend in back with the factory finish after you've done your diamond polishing. To leave the customer for daily use, the Quartz Renew Daily Cleaner is very safe to use on quartz surfaces. It's a non-streak. It's applied with a microfiber towel, and this is something that is very easy to use, safe for the homeowner to use. A lot of products that are on the market now are not friendly to the quartz, the resin that's in the product, so we decided to offer something that was safe to use every day.